Well, what is it, fellas?
Mr. Benny, how long have you been standing out here?
All his life, Jack Webb carried a secret he refused to reveal, not to the press, not to Hollywood, not even to the people who thought they knew him best. But as the final chapter of his life drew near, the man who built Dragnet, the man whose voice defined an era of American crime drama, finally broke his silence. He whispered 5 names, 5 actors he said had wounded him, betrayed him, challenged him, or humiliated him so deeply that he could never forgive them. For decades, the public saw him as calm, controlled Joe Friday, stoic, icy, disciplined. But beneath that perfect shell lived a man who remembered every slight, every argument, every act of defiance. And when he finally revealed the truth, those closest to him said it was the first and last time Jack Webb ever allowed the world to see the anger he hid behind the badge. These weren't just disagreements, they were wars. And today, we uncover the 5 Hollywood figures who pushed Jack Webb to his limit. Before he died, these were the names he swore he could never forget. Richard Boone wasn't just another actor who crossed paths with Jack Webb. He became the one name Webb never forgave, not even decades later, not even as he faced the end of his life. Their feud ignited in 1972 during the production of Heck Ramsey on the Universal Studios backlot. Boone arrived with the swagger of a man who had carried an entire television era on his shoulders. He was a legend thanks to Have Gun, Will Travel, a commanding presence who spoke his mind without hesitation. Jack Webb, meanwhile, ruled the production from behind the scenes, silent, stern, a man obsessed with discipline and absolute creative control. His company, Mark 7 Limited, was known for rewriting scripts overnight, reshaping narratives, and demanding unwavering obedience. And that was where the collision began. Almost immediately, Webb began altering scripts, removing key story beats, firing writers Boone trusted, and transforming the tone of Heck Ramsey into something closer to Dragnet than the character-driven Western Boone believed in. To Boone, this wasn't creative direction, it was sabotage. One October morning in 1972, inside the echoing walls of Stage 24, the feud finally exploded. Boone slammed a revised script onto a metal table so hard that the sound froze the entire set. He stared directly at Webb and shouted, "You're strangling this show, Jack." Crew members would later say it was the moment the air itself went silent. Webb did not back down. He never did. When Webb removed director William Wyard, Boone's trusted collaborator, Boone went straight to NBC executives and accused Webb of running the show like a military boot camp. Word traveled quickly. Webb heard every whisper, every insult. By early 1973, the tension had become so intense that they nearly came to physical blows inside Webb's Mark 7 office on Lancashire Boulevard. Boone stood up, pointed at Webb, and growled, "I don't take orders from a man who doesn't trust his own actors." From that moment forward, communication between them broke down completely. By the final season, the 2 men spoke only through assistants, never directly, never calmly, never again. NBC would later admit something shocking. Heck Ramsey didn't end because of the ratings. It ended because working with Jack Webb and Richard Boone at the same time became impossible. The set had become a battlefield with no truce in sight. For Jack Webb, Richard Boone remained the ultimate enemy, emotional, rebellious, unpredictable, and unwilling to bow to the hierarchy Webb demanded. And until his final days, Boone was the one actor Webb hated without hesitation. the one feud he never allowed time to heal. If Richard Boone was the man Jack Webb openly battled, then William Conrad was the wound that cut silently deeply and never healed. Their story didn't begin with shouting or public humiliation. It began with trust, with admiration, with two men standing side by side as Dragnet dominated American radio in 1951. William Conrad's voice, rich, booming, unforgettable, carried the emotional weight of the show. He wasn't just a co-star, he was its backbone. Listeners adored him. Executives praised him. Everyone assumed that when Dragnet made the leap to television in 1952, Conrad would naturally follow. Everyone except Jack Webb. Behind closed doors, Webb made a decision he told no one about, not even Conrad. He quietly replaced him with Ben Alexander for the TV version. No meeting, no courtesy call, not even a 5-second conversation. The news reached Conrad not from Webb, but from a secretary at NBC. For a man who had poured his talent and heart into the show, the humiliation was devastating. Conrad reportedly told a colleague that same afternoon, "Jack didn't even look me in the eye. He just erased me." The phrase spread like wildfire across Los Angeles radio circles. And when the press caught whispers that Conrad was dropped for being too heavy for television, the situation spiraled. Webb despised gossip, and whether it was true or not, he blamed Conrad for letting the rumor spread, turning a private decision into an industry scandal. In early 1953, Conrad tried twice to call Webb, hoping for closure or at least one honest conversation. Webb ignored both calls. According to one longtime assistant, Webb simply said, "We're not opening that door again." And that was the end of it. As Dragnet exploded into a national phenomenon, Jack Webb stood in the spotlight of a franchise William Conrad had helped build from the ground up. But Conrad watched from the sidelines unacknowledged, erased from the legacy he helped create. From that moment forward, Jack Webb never spoke William Conrad's name publicly again. Not in interviews, not in retrospectives, not once. Their feud wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was quiet, cold, and deeply personal. The kind of resentment that settles in a man's bones and never leaves. To the audience, Jack Webb and Harry Morgan looked like the perfect on-a-screen team. Calm, respectful, professional, a partnership built on stability and trust. But behind the camera, a silent, corrosive tension was growing, one that Jack Webb carried with him until his final days. Their conflict didn't begin with anger, it began with a single request. In 1967, when Harry Morgan joined the Dragnet revival as Officer Bill Gannon, he brought decades of acting experience. He valued nuance, subtlety, humanity in every line. During their first week of filming at the KNBC lot in Burbank, Morgan gently asked if he could adjust a line so it sounded more natural, a simple request. But for Jack Webb, who demanded absolute script accuracy, it was an act of defiance. Crew members later recalled how Webb froze, stared at Morgan for several long, uncomfortable seconds, and said flatly, "Say it as written." Morgan wasn't trying to rebel, he simply wanted the dialogue to breathe, to feel real. But every time he added a touch of humanity, Webb cut him off, insisting that Dragnet was about facts, not feelings. By early 1968, their quiet friction had grown into a cold wall. A lighting technician remembered hearing Webb grumble after one take, "Harry wants to act. I want accuracy." The breaking point arrived during a night shoot in May 1969. Morgan stumbled through a technical line and asked for a second take. Webb refused, demanding that the imperfect take be printed. Morgan, calm but firm, replied, "Jack, it doesn't play right." Webb's answer, according to a sound operator, "It plays how I say it plays." Those 6 words ended any hope of a genuine friendship. From that night on, Morgan stopped offering suggestions. He delivered exactly what Webb wanted: precision without warmth, accuracy without depth. The show ran efficiently, but the spirit between them had died. Years later, Morgan would speak kindly of Webb in interviews, saying Jack was a good man, but everything had to be done his way. To most people, it sounded like a polite observation. To Jack Webb, it was a knife wrapped in velvet. He saw it as criticism disguised as diplomacy, and he took it personally, very personally. Though the two continued working together, the resentment Webb felt toward Morgan endured quietly, heavily, right up to the end of his life. Among all the people Jack Webb clashed with, Robert A. Sinider was unique. He wasn't an actor. He wasn't someone Webb could silence with authority. He was a creative equal, one of the few minds in Hollywood capable of challenging Webb at the deepest level, and that was exactly why Webb grew to resent him more than almost anyone else. Their partnership began with hope. They were meant to build something groundbreaking together, a new breed of procedural television that blended real paramedic work with gripping drama. That series would become Emergency. But the moment Sinider questioned Webb's definition of realism, everything began to crack. Their first major confrontation erupted during a development meeting in 1971 inside Universal Studios Building 24. Sinider pitched a storyline inspired by an actual Los Angeles County case in which a paramedic froze during a traumatic call, a raw human moment. Webb shut it down instantly. "Paramedics don't freeze," he insisted. Sinider pushed back. "Real people break, Jack. That's what makes them human." That sentence, simple, honest, ignited a war. To Webb, Sinider was undermining his identity, his philosophy, his brand of rigid authenticity. To Sinider, Webb was stripping the heart out of stories for the sake of cold procedure. As production began in 1972, the friction only intensified. Sinider wanted emotional truth. Webb wanted a strict accuracy. A script supervisor recalled seeing Webb slash entire pages with a red pen, muttering, "Facts first, feelings second." Sinider snapped his notebook shut and walked out. Their battle spilled onto the set as well. When Webb cut emotional beats in editing, Sinider retaliated by appearing more frequently during shooting, standing behind the camera, urging actors to play it real, not cold. Webb eventually banned him from the shooting floor unless specifically invited. By late 1973, NBC attempted to mediate. The meeting lasted barely 13 minutes. Webb demanded military precision. Sinider argued that audiences cared about characters, not robots. Afterward, Webb reportedly told a colleague, "Sinider wants drama, I want truth. We can't both win." And they never did. Although Emergency became a massive hit, the respect between them evaporated. By the show's later seasons, they communicated only through assistance. A creative marriage turned into a Cold War. To Jack Webb, Sinider represented something far more dangerous than rebellion. He was the one man Webb could not fully control, and that made him unforgettable in Webb's long gallery of grudges. Of all the conflicts Jack Webb carried with him, the one involving Herb Ellis cut the deepest and lingered the longest. Not because Ellis was the most famous, not because he caused the biggest scandal, but because he was the first actor Webb ever fired, the first man he felt had openly challenged his authority. and the first former colleague whose name he refused to utter again. In 1952, Dragnet was becoming a nationwide radio sensation. Ellis wasn't just another voice in the cast. He was the very first actor to bring Officer Frank Smith to life. He helped define the rhythm, tone, and chemistry that listeners came to love between Smith and Joe Friday. Naturally, he expected to follow Webb as Dragnet moved toward television. But Jack Webb already had different plans. He wanted a softer presence, someone less assertive, someone he believed he could direct without resistance. That man would eventually be Ben Alexander. The confrontation that ended everything happened late one night during a rehearsal inside the cramped radio studios on Sunset Boulevard. Webb introduced a rewrite that stripped Ellis's lines of their humor and warmth, turning them into pure procedural dialogue. Ellis, confused and frustrated, finally pushed back. He said a partner on the show needed personality, not just a badge number. Webb stopped the rehearsal. He turned to Ellis and said, "The lines are correct. Your attitude isn't." Those 6 words sealed Ellis's fate. 3 days later, Webb summoned him to the Mark 7 office and abruptly informed him that he was being replaced. No negotiation, no explanation, no conversation, just gone. For Ellis, it wasn't simply being fired, it was being erased from the legacy he helped build. In a 1960 interview, Ellis spoke openly about Webb's style. Jack wanted obedience, not acting. That quote spread quickly through the industry, and Jack Webb never forgave him for it. When the Dragnet TV series premiered later that same year, Ellis wasn't invited, credited, or acknowledged as the original Frank Smith. NBC executives even suggested giving him guest roles, but Webb refused. According to one longtime assistant, Webb said, "If he questioned me once, he'll question me again." And from that moment forward, Webb never spoke Herb Ellis's name again. Not privately, not publicly, not once. For Jack Webb, Ellis was the beginning, the first reminder that one act of defiance could live forever in his memory. When Jack Webb finally revealed the names of the 5 men he could never forgive, those closest to him were stunned, not because the names were unexpected, but because of what they represented. These weren't just disagreements. They weren't temporary clashes of ego or fleeting moments of frustration. Each man symbolized something that Jack Webb feared, battled, or carried within himself. Richard Boone was the fire, defiant, emotional, uncontrollable. He represented everything Webb couldn't tolerate on a set he believed belonged to him alone. William Conrad was the wound, a reminder of a friend he betrayed and then resented for reacting like a human being. Harry Morgan was the disappointment, a partnership that looked perfect from the outside but slowly crumbled under Webb's obsession with control. Robert A. Sinadair was the threat, a creative equal, was someone he could not direct, silence, or overpower, the one man who made him feel vulnerable in his own kingdom. Herb Ellis was the origin, the first rebellion Webb ever faced, the first challenge to his authority, the scar that taught him never to forgive when his leadership was questioned. To outsiders, Jack Webb seemed composed, disciplined, a man defined by reason and order. But inside, he carried grudges like shackles, each one tied to a moment when he felt his authority slipping, his vision mocked, or his control challenged. In his final days, when most men softened, Webb did the opposite. He held on to the memories, held on to the voices, held on to the moments when each of these 5 men made him feel something he could never quite admit: doubt, For a man who built an empire on unwavering certainty, doubt was unforgivable. As he recounted the names, one by one, he didn't speak with rage. He spoke with clarity, as though he had been replaying these memories for years. He believed these 5 men had shaped his career, his temperament, and the walls he built around himself. Were they truly enemies, or were they mirrors reflecting the parts of Jack Webb he could never face? That is the question he left behind.